So let's start off with year 536. We begin our journey through time by turning the clock back to the year 536, which researchers from Harvard University have officially named the worst year ever to be alive. You might think it was because of a big war, but the real villain was actually a huge volcano, most likely in Iceland. When this volcano erupted, it threw millions of tons of ash and sulfur into the atmosphere and created a thick layer of smoke that spread across the entire northern hemisphere. The sun became a weak, bluish spot in the sky, and there was constant darkness for a full 18 months. It was like a night that simply refused to end. Because the sun's rays could not get through, the global summer temperature dropped by up to 2.5 degrees Celsius, which may not sound like much, but it was enough to start the coldest decade in the last 2,300 years. In China, snow fell in the middle of summer, causing all crops to freeze and die in the fields. When plants die, animals have nothing to eat, and when animals die, humans have nothing to eat. Old Irish history books from that year simply write 3 frightening words: failure of bread. People all over the world simply starved to death in the darkness, and this year started a chain reaction of hunger and disease that weakened the world for a whole century. The next one is in year 1347, and it was horrible. So let's move forward about 800 years to the year 1347, when a new and very different disaster hit Europe. Ships from the Black Sea arrived at the port city of Messina in Sicily, but when the dock workers went on board to unload the goods, they found almost all the sailors dead. The few who were still breathing were covered in large black swellings the size of apples, leaking blood and pus. This was the arrival of the bubonic plague, which we today call the Black Death. The disease was caused by a tiny bacterium called Yersinia pestis, which lived inside the stomachs of fleas that traveled on the backs of black rats. And in the 1300s, there were rats everywhere in the dirty European cities. To keep it simple, this bacterium was like an army of microscopic ninjas that tricked the body's defenses, so the immune system did not even realize it was under attack until it was far too late. In just 4 to 5 years, the disease spread extremely fast, and it is estimated that about 50 million people in Europe died. That equals an incredible 60% of Europe's population at the time. Imagine standing in a room with 10 of your friends, and before the month is over, 6 of them are gone. Entire villages were left as empty ghost towns, and fields grew wild because there was simply not enough people left alive to harvest the crops. Now we jump across the Atlantic and arrive in the year 1520, which was a true nightmare for the native peoples of what is now Mexico. The year before, the Spanish had arrived in the powerful Aztec Empire with ships full of weapons, horses, and a hunger for gold. But the most dangerous weapon the Spanish carried was not their guns, but a small passenger in their blood: the smallpox virus. The Aztecs' bodies had never encountered this virus before. If we think of the immune system as a library filled with instruction books on how to fight diseases, the Spanish had lived with smallpox for centuries and already had the book ready. The Aztecs' library, on the other hand, was completely empty in this area. In 1520, smallpox broke out in the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, which was a massive city of about 1 million people built in a lake. In less than a year, the virus killed between 5 and 8 million people, causing society to collapse completely. People were so sick that no one could get food or clean water. So many simply died of thirst in their beds, covered in itchy sores from head to toe. This was the beginning of a pandemic across North and South America, which over the next 100 years wiped out up to 90% of the native population, an overwhelming number of nearly 55 million people, mainly because their bodies faced a disease without having the instructions to fight it. Time passes, science improves, but nature always has a new trick up its sleeve, and that brings us to the year 1918. World War I was finally coming to an end, and millions of soldiers had lived in cold, muddy trenches for 4 years. But just as peace was about to be celebrated, the Spanish flu hit the world. It did not actually start in Spain, but because Spain was neutral during the war and did not censor its newspapers, it was the first country to report on the pandemic, which is how it got its name. What made this influenza virus such a cold-blooded killer was the way it attacked. Normally, the flu is most dangerous for very young and very old people, but the Spanish flu instead hit strong, young adults between 20 and 40 years old. The virus used the victim's own strong immune system against them in what doctors call a cytokine storm. The immune system went into panic mode and sent too many white blood cells and fluid into the lungs to fight the virus, which meant that patients effectively drowned in their own body fluids from the inside within a few days. This virus infected 500 million people, which in 1918 was exactly 1/3 of all humans on Earth, and it is estimated that between 50 and 100 million people died. Hospitals were so overcrowded that people were placed out in the streets, and carpenters could not build coffins fast enough. We end our dark journey in the year 1943, in the middle of World War II, which is without doubt the bloodiest conflict humanity has ever created for itself. Unlike the other years, this was not a volcano or an invisible virus, but humans deliberately destroying each other. In 1943, the war was at its absolute peak, and factories all over the world had completely stopped producing things like cars, refrigerators, and toys. Instead, they were only making bombers, tanks, and machine guns. This was the year when the Holocaust reached its peak, with industrial death camps that systematically murdered millions of innocent people, while at the same time, more than 3 million people starved to death in the Indian region of Bengal because the war destroyed food supplies. In total, World War II cost between 70 and 85 million people their lives, which was about 3% of the world's population at the time. The number of bombs dropped on cities like London, Berlin, and Tokyo reduced centuries of history to rubble in just a few hours and left more than 50 million people as homeless refugees, forced to walk through a freezing Europe with only the clothes on their bodies.